Hey, what's up? I'm Kirk of Effectatron, and I wanted to show you how to install and download Quixel and get it working, because it's not really that simple and clear cut, and we're going to be using it a lot in the really rad renders sweepstakes scene that we're going to create, and I use it several times because it does have some really cool assets. So if you don't know what I'm talking about with the really rad renders sweepstakes, it's your chance to create something, have fun, and enter to win real prizes. Check out the video below about that, download the scene, and follow along, right? So we're going to have tutorials over the next month and a half that's going to be basically in-depth environment creating things, because when I did a poll of my YouTube community, a lot of you really said you wanted, the majority wanted more in-depth environmental training. So that's what we're going to do. Because I really enjoy making it, and so let's go ahead and use Quixel because it's kind of really easy to elevate your scenes a little bit, but it's not really that easy to get it to work with C4D and Redshift. So it says one-click integration. That's true with Unreal Engine, not so much the case with Cinema 4D and Redshift. Okay, so Quixel.com/plugins, and you're going to go ahead and get the Bridge plugin for Cinema 4D, plugin version 2.2. Now, it gets a little confusing here because you need to sign in. You need to have an Epic Games account. Totally free to use, okay? Free to make, free to use. Then when you go to subscribe, you see you have these plans, and you don't see Cinema 4D listed anywhere, and you think you need to pay for it. You don't need to pay for it if you're only using it for personal work and for stuffs and like for fun, which is what I do. But you cannot give it away or for anything like that, or give it to a client or anything like that. If you're getting, basically, if you're making stuff for money, you can't. You need to pay for the personal use. $20 a month for the amount of assets it has. It's probably worth it. I mean, if you're doing something for a client, obviously that would probably pay for itself instantly. So there you go. But you need to just get the unlimited access one, and you'll still be able to use it with Redshift and C4D, no problem. Now, on top of that, there's also, go back to Quixel, there's also Megascans, right? So then, same thing here, which it's all kind of the same. So you go to choose plan, and it's the exact same page. So you're like, what's Bridge? What's Megascan? Like, it's all wrapped up into one convoluted thing, right? So download that plugin, that Bridge down thing, that Bridge version 2.2 that we did. Open that up, install that, sign into your Epic Games account, blah, 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 okay? Okay, so after you've created your Epic account, you've downloaded Bridge, you've downloaded the plugin, you also need to download Bridge, which you need to go to Quixel and choose Bridge, and actually download Bridge as well. So, okay, yeah. So now you've downloaded the Bridge plugin, you also need to download Bridge by itself. There we go, that way you can actually have the tool. Bridge is just the basically the plugin user interface that has all the assets in there for us to use. Pretty cool. Okay, so now you've got that. Open that up, install that, do all that stuff, sign in with your Epic Game account, and you should be good to go. Now, a couple things you need to check. Inside of Cinema 4D, you need to go to Extensions, and you should see the Megascans plugin. I know, again, it's confusing because we just downloaded Bridge, but that should be there, because when you click that, you'll see it's plugin version 2.2. It's just called Megascans and not Bridge. Totally fine. If you don't see that, do a quick Google search for that for C4D and see if it's somewhere else, because that should be there. Okay? Next thing you need to do, you have to go to we'll open up Quixel Bridge, and you're going to need to sign in with your Epic Games account. No problem. And then we should be good to go, right? Okay, so now let's talk about settings inside of Bridge to actually work with C4D, and then another thing we have to do in C4D to get things to actually come in properly. So we can come in here, we have all these assets and stuff, so let's go ahead and just grab something like, we'll do surfaces, which is what's going to be materials, and we'll grab something like a mossy ground, and we'll do Nordic forest ground moss. Sure, why not? Click. And when you click it, you see you have the, just related assets. You've got the ability to choose the resolution you want, stuff like that. We're going to do 4K for now. You can do 8K if you're going to get really close to something. 8K is really good. Now, the thing we need to make sure that we do is you need to click this little filter down here in the bottom right. Go to Download Settings. Inside of Download Settings, you can choose what you want. I do JPEGs. You can do EXRs if you have space for that on your computer. It's going to be a higher dynamic range, but the file size is going to be astronomically bigger. Okay, and underneath the textures, we are going to just make sure that our displacement map is set to just JPEG for now. You can do an EXR if you want, but basically if you see a bunch of stuff on here that you think doesn't need to be clicked, just hit reset to default and it should be good. Albedo and diffuse are the same, basically, so it should be fine. So we've got textures, and we also have models here. So this is where we need to make sure that we're setting everything as an FBX. And this part here is very important. We want to make sure that we're not using a level of detail for things we're going to look at closely for models. Because C4D does handle high poly counts now really well, I choose the high poly source model, which is going to give you the highest quality object that you can get. Now, besides that, if you just are going to have a bunch of stuff in the background, you can do different levels of detail here by selecting these, okay? So that's going to be what downloads. Now, on top of that, we need to go back into this filter and go to export settings. Inside of here, you want to make sure the target is set to C4D, and then again, you have textures and models here. So textures, again, gives you the option to choose the format. You just want to make sure you match what you're downloading. So there you go. And then you have surfaces, all that stuff. So surfaces inside of here, again, these should match. If they don't, just reset to default. And the weird thing is these come in with diffuse and albedo both selected, whereas when we went into our object here, the download settings, diffuse is not on by default. So let's go ahead and click that on just in case, okay? And then we'll go back to export settings and textures, and you have to do this for each thing. So if you have assets in here, you want to make sure your displacement is on. It's going to be JPEG, gray map, perfect, okay? So you have all these attributes in here. RGB, okay, good. Everything's looking good. And then again, we have models. Now, once again, we want to make sure that we have high poly source selected because that's what we're downloading. And again, FBX, right? Okay, so now that our export settings match our download settings, we can grab this, just click download, and then click export. So let's open up C4D. We've got a fresh blank scene. And let's go ahead and go to Quixel Bridge and hit export. Now here's what's going to happen for you, right? It's going to say exported successfully, but you're going to get an error that says that it failed to create the Redshift material. Very easy fix and very common thing that I get asked a lot. How do I fix that? You simply go over to Edit, Preferences, and underneath the renderer for Redshift, you have to make sure that Node Materials for Presets is off, okay? That's it. So now when we delete this, boop, we can come back into Bridge. And this is true for anything with materials, plants, whatever. Okay, now it says export successfully, and you can see it actually did, in fact, bring in our thing. So let's go ahead and just make a tiny little landscape here. Cool, just default settings. Less furrows. We'll just make it a nice smooth little landscape. We'll even make it smaller. It's very small, but that's fine because we're just doing kind of a model. So it looks really bad right here, right? So let's go ahead and go to our render view and just take a look at what this actually looks like. And you can see it's pretty bad, but the stuff to make it look good seems to be there. It seems to be an okay scale and stuff. If you ever need to, you can tile it up even more. If you have it on a big landscape, you'll probably need to tile it more. So we'll tile it twice. And for our landscape, we want to make sure we have lots of segments because we're going to need to add displacement on this. So we're going to go ahead and right-click this, go to Render Tags, Redshift Object Tag, and then inside of our Nordic Forest, you can see it's the old shader graph. I don't like that. If you want, you can just, with this selected, you go to Material, Tools, Convert, and Replace with Nodes, and that's going to update that in the new shader graph for you. So we've added a backlight. We've got our backlight back here, and we've got our thing, our landscape here with some decent amount of segments and stuff, and we want to really mess with the displacement because that's going to make the little pine cones and stuff like that actually pop. Now, before we get any further, the things you have to do with Quixel is all of the assets, they all come in set to auto, and half of them need to be raw, half of them need to be sRGB. So when you add in a bunch of random either models, assets, whatever, if you have a bunch of them in there at once, you can just come over here to the Redshift tab, go to the Redshift Asset Manager, and then literally select everything is the easiest thing to do. And then we'll go over here to color space, left click, choose raw. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click this little search icon, and you can search for all the albedo or base colors, and you'll get all of them, and just change them back to sRGB. And that way you can batch convert all these things without having to go into each material, find the node, change it there, and do that, right? So now you can just batch update them all. So now that we have that actually set up, let's go ahead and right click this, add our render tags, Redshift object tag, geometry, tessellation, and displacement. And then we need to go into our our material. And for displacement, I like to use -0.5 and 0.5 for the new range. It's going to be default to 0 and 1. But this way it's going to keep that ratio, but actually suck in the ground and then push out. And so it's going to keep your landscape kind of where it is versus raising it all up. Just kind of makes things easier when placing stuff. So let's take a look at that and see what that looks like, because it may or may not be good enough and we may need to fix it. Yeah, so that's what that looks like. Doesn't look that good, right? So let's go ahead and crank it up to like 20 and 20. And it is going to take a little bit to cook. There we go. Now we're looking a little better, but we're still kind of looking kind of crummy and low res, right? And also it's just dark. Why is my dome light so dark? Let's crank it up to like 3. All right, we're getting a little, that's like okay. But we're still getting, it just kind of looks weird, right? It doesn't look very good. So what I want to do is I want to come in here, and rather than crank this all the way up to 10 and 20 and 20, we're going to do 10 and 10. I think that's a very common one, but we're going to go ahead and go to the minimum edge length, turn that down to 2, and the subdivisions up to 8. Basically, that's going to say subdivide it more so we actually get it to look right. Okay? It's going to take longer to render, but once we get it, we can lock it in so it doesn't take any longer to render. And again, we did the 4K, not the 8K. So, okay, that looks pretty good. Now again, if you wanted to do like a tight shot of this or anything, you wanted to get the 8K texture, but we're just doing it for the base ground level. So once you have this set, we're going to click this snowflake, which is going to do that tessellation one more time, but then it's going to allow us to actually spin around without having to wait for it to tessellate. So there we go. So now we actually have like live feedback again. So if you look at this from a distance, it's going to look really nice because you are getting a little bit of that tessellation and displacement. And again, totally up to you on how you want to do it, but this is probably a pretty good amount. 10 and 10 is probably a good rule. Honestly, we could probably tile this in smaller. It all just depends on what you're going for, right? Because we have a human in here. Boop. Let's throw him in there. And then everything seems to be about the right size right now, honestly. So I'm not too worried about that. Okay, cool. So there's that. That's one thing. Okay, now let's address another issue. For now, we're going to turn off this tessellation because we don't need it. And we're going to bring in a plant because this is another common issue that a lot of people have. And we're going to be using a lot of plants because, I mean, that's honestly that's the best part about Quixel is the plants. So let's go ahead and grab like a common fern. And again, 4K is probably fine. Download that. All the settings should carry over. And then we're going to export that. Exporting. We'll turn off the IPR. Again, it comes in as gibberish. We can select all those and use our placement tool if we want. And you may notice that it all came in gray, which is annoying. So we're going to, again, go to Material with this selected, Tools, and Convert and Replace with Nodes. So a common issue that happens right now with Quixel is that it brings in the translucency map, but doesn't plug it into the color map. So we've got the translucency map. So what I want to do is hold Control, click, and copy. So Control, click, and drag, and I'm going to plug that into the color map. Then I'm going to go back to the translucency map, and I'm actually going to do like 0.7 or maybe 0.5, which is going to, for the gamma, which is going to give it like a lighter color. So that way, when our light shines through our plant and we trigger that backlighting that's really cool and built into the RS material, It's going to give us that nice subsurface scatter look without actually being subsurface scattered. Again, displacement, negative 0.5 and 0.5. I wish you could batch do that, but you can't. There you go. But again, we're going to go to our Redshift Assets, Asset Manager, select all these, set our HDR Light Studio, click, and then Raw, and again, we'll type in the albedo, and maybe that one's called Translucency, but maybe it's actually going to be fine to be translucent. If it's not an albedo, it should be fine. So we're going to go ahead and go to Render View and take a look at that. So yes, we won't have to wait for the displacement right now because we have it turned off. But there we go. We have our nice plant here where if we look at it, with that backlight shining through it, you're going to see, let's turn off our dome light so you can see it specifically. Struggling. We see that we get that nice light shining through. So we can come in here and crank that up, maybe dial it in. So you get that really nice fake subsurface scattering through that translucency map because we have that nice, the lower gamma on those. So that's going to give us that nice look there. Okay, now displacement you probably don't need on a lot of plants, but if you want to, you can. But most of the time it's probably going to be fine. What you can actually do for the displacement map, what I found is you can create a bump map, and grab that displacement and plug it into the bump map, but set it to height field. And again, we'll do -1 here because it's a bump. It's not going to be that big a deal. And we can plug that into the overall bump map. So now we should get a little more detail out of our plants. It should look a little less like a paper cutout. It's not going to be that drastic because again, it's a bump map, but it does give you a little bit better detail. And again, we can come back in here, turn the lights back on and stuff, and take a closer look at it. And we just get that little bit of bump going on. And again, for our ground, you may notice we had bump and stuff selected. So where the heck, where's our bump, right? Why don't we have one? So Nordic grass floor, it just didn't come in. So let's go ahead and grab a bump. And we're going to go ahead and grab this displacement. And you can notice it's red. That's totally fine because it's going to extract out what it needs from that. It's strange, I know. But we're going to grab that and go in here to overall bump again. There we go. And so now we should have a little better detail in there. The main reason I think it doesn't have it is because when you use displacement, it toggles an instant bump map. So, but there. Anywho, I'm not sure that actually worked at all. We can go in here and do a ramp and drag that in between and clamp it down. So we're actually going to get a grayscale map. Maybe we just need to bring up the black. Yeah. So that should give us some actual bump like that. Okay. Yeah, there we go. This gives us a little bit of bump. But again, obviously it's not that fancy. So yeah, weird issues. Play around with getting things to work. So they bring in a bump map. Let's go ahead and come in here to our download settings and normal bump, bump, bump. Let's click all those on. We'll go back and then go to our export settings, textures, 3D plants, bump, normal bump. It's not even an option. It's very confusing, right? But let's try and export down. Well, hang on. We got to download it and then export it. Downloading. And export that. We're going to see if that one comes in properly. Looks like it's come in with the exact same stuff. So, doesn't matter. Frustrating, right? Pretty dumb. Okay, last thing we'll do is bring in a landscape model because, again, it's probably the last thing you're going to need, and we might as well just cover all of the bases. So we're going to go ahead and go to 3D Assets, grab a nature piece, and we'll do like an embankment that looks cool, has a lot of detail. Like, let's filter by environments, and let's do a tundra. I love the tundra stuff. And we'll do like a massive tundra rock, right? Boom. And you can see it's got a little scale here. There's a little bitty guy right there because this is huge. And we're going to go with 8K. We're going to download it. And then we're going to export it in and take a look at that. And that'll be the last thing we do because it's a lot. Actually, let's grab this tundra mossy boulder. And we'll do 8K, and there's a little guy for size on how big this is. And this is going to be a nice one to bring into our scene because it should give us a good example of how displacement is actually supposed to work and stuff, and everything's looking good. So it's just kind of frustrating that you tell it to download things and it just doesn't. I will say that stuff like Kitbash actually brings in everything, and it's a little better when it comes to a plugin. But again, Kitbash isn't owned by Epic, so... Anyway, here we go. Did I export it or just download it? Export it. Okay, cool. So I brought that in. Sometimes when you bring in an asset like that, it'll come in a world root, and you'll need to actually move your material on there. Let's take a look at this. This is probably going to be pretty big. So it's loading in. There we go. Boom. Big ol'. There we go. Look at that. That is... very high poly. Let's take a look at the lines. You can see it's insanely high poly, but that's okay because we're in 2024. And there we go. So we're going to grab that, pull it back, and let's just pull it back a bit here, and we'll grab our light and pull it up. So, whoops. We'll grab our light here and pull it up so it can actually light up our scene a bit. We'll make it a little bigger. There we go. Okay. And again, what we want to do is instead of this, we're just going to leave it in this one for now. Oh, look, it actually came in with the bump. So that's good. That came in properly. So we're going to grab roughness map, normal map, shift, and displacement map, switch them all to raw. So here's what I'll say about bringing in assets like this and this rock. See how high poly it is? It looks really good, but it's always going to have limitations. Like, it looks great from here. Like, displacement's not even on. I don't even know if we need it for this. But when you start getting in close, you're always going to get this weird kind of like, yeah, that's not that great. So maybe we accidentally downloaded the 4K version. That's just 8K. So yeah, 8K. That's just what it's going to look like, which is fine. Because when we zoom out and we look at it in our scene like this, you know, like if this is our whole scene, that's going to look really, really good, right? So if you want to add displacement, you can. What I will say about displacement with objects is it gets a little weird sometimes. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that for the actual objects and stuff, you're going to leave the range how it is and not do the negative 0.5 thing because it just doesn't like it sometimes. And then you might even need to scale back the scale of it. You don't need to make it near as high. So we'll try here. So what I'll do is I'll turn on this, and we're going to set this to the default 4 and 6, and we're going to say 1 and 1, and we'll leave it like that, and we'll go ahead and say okay, and that should subdivide that. It's going to take it a while because it's subdividing a very high poly object, but again, we can do our snowflake trick. But I'm really curious to see if we can even really tell a difference and see if it's worth it to even add a displacement, or if we should just let it be the bump map when it's like an object like this, because that looks really good. So there it is with displacement. I don't really even know that I see a difference. We can crank it up to maybe 2 and 2 and see if we start to see a difference there. I want to see the difference, but maybe we don't. Maybe it needs to be subtle. Maybe we're just bumping up the moss a little bit on there. And again, we'll do our snowflake trick. Not really a trick, it's literally a feature built for this purpose. But it looks really good from this distance. And that's kind of the thing you have to keep in mind with all these assets is, yes, they're 3D scans. Yes, they're 8K. But you still can't zoom in on everything and get really close and have it look good. It's kind of a bummer, but there you go. All right, but there we go. So now we can take a look at this from another angle. Maybe it does look pretty good. Yeah, I think with that little bit of displacement, it turned out really nice. It just kind of seems to have elevated our moss a little bit, which is really all we want. So yeah, now from a distance, it looks, I mean, that looks really, really good, right? So again, we come in, get like a longer lens on our camera. 150, that's pretty long already. We'll do like 250. Really zoom in and let's catch a glimpse of it with like the light hitting in like that. And we can do a nice little depth of field. Turn on bokeh, click to focus like right here and make it really shallow. We'll type in like 1. It's going to be super shallow, but there you go. So now we get this nice kind of macro shot on a really, really nice detailed model. So again, you know, you put a plant right there. Let's take our fern. Obviously the fern's not a good example, but if you had like a blade of grass or something right there, it would look really good. Let's pretend this is that. We'll scale it down really small and put it on there. And pretend it's a blade of grass, right? Piece of little bitty. Little bitty guy. All right, there. Right? I mean, that looks pretty cool. Let's just paint on a bunch of those really quick. Now we're having fun. All right, so cool. We've got that. Let's paint on a bunch of those. Did that work at all? Probably not. 1 second. Oh, it did. They're on there. I just need more of them. So we're going to say count up, spacing down. And do more. There we go. So now we can draw a bunch of those. Let's see if they load in here. And it might look kind of nice. Yeah, like a little bitty fake moss. So if you want to do a macro shot, you can use ferns for moss. Who knew? Yeah. Again, we can just now, I think it was this one, right? Scale it up. And that should, is that the one we used? Which is the one we used? That one. Scale it up and it'll scale up all of them. And we might get a really nice looking shot. Probably look silly. It might look better being small, but there you go. That's not bad. Pretty cool. So there, yeah. So you have the option to do a lot of really amazing, cool things. Obviously, we zoom out on that and realize, oh, it's a very small. Looks good. Turn bokeh off. There we go. And so now we can come in and, you know, get a real tight macro shot again. Like so. Silly, I know. I don't know why I'm doing it, but there we go. Click to focus right there. But you could do that with something that looks like moss, with grass, whatever. And so hopefully all of these settings, where I know a lot, and that's kind of the whole thing, was the fact that Quixel just has a lot of nuances that are not intuitive. And that would be the surface displacement needs to be negative and positive. The object displacement does not. And then how to actually connect the lights, change the translucency layer, how to actually use the displacement to be a bump for the plants. All of that stuff hopefully has helped you understand like how to create some cool stuff. And so now maybe you can actually use Quixel comfortably. If this helped you maybe with some headaches and stuff with Quixel, let me know in the description or the comments below. Thank you again. And again, I cannot wait to get started creating with our environments. So very, very cool. Yeah. See you next time.